Da-da-da. Welcome to Nerdist Book Club. I think my makeup is, yeah, okay. I wasn't just crying. Still might. Welcome to Nerdist Book Club, the best damn book club out there. What's up? You're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Twitch. Make yourself known in the chat there. My name is Maude Garrett. Joining me as always, we got Rachel Heine in here. Rachel,
Hello.
this book has broken me.
I know. For everyone joining us, as soon as I signed on to our call, our pre-call, Maude was in
Weeping.
tears. So
Weeping.
sometimes tears are cathartic. It's a beauty, so we'll get into it. No shame here.
No, this is definitely, you can hear it.
There may
and
be
you
no
can see
crying
it.
in baseball, but there is crying in book club. So.
Crying in book club. Vaden says, I think it broke a lot of us. Yes, good. I'm glad I'm not alone with this one. I've been documenting on my stories throughout the day just how often it gets me. And it turns out if I think of one phrase, one line, do you remember? Book sad. Book good? Book good. Book sad. Book sad. But do you remember way back in the alpha days where Hector learnt about a line in a book that would make me cry?
Yes.
And it was in the last part of the last Harry Potter book where you find out that Harry has named his kid Albus Severus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel anything anymore for that. That one, had an expiration date, and but I have a new phrase. Ooh, if I say it, I'll cry. It is 4 words. 4 words. This is what did it. This is what it is for me. 4 words. He's waiting for you. He's waiting for you.
And there's so much like the line itself, but also who it comes from after the entire journey of the book and Patroclus, Patroclus. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm excited to talk about the rest of the book. I think this is our first month in a while doing multiple episodes for a book, and I'm already just really glad that we are doing this because I feel like being able to touch base about the characters and whatever journey they're going on and themes that we're seeing, and then getting to kind of see where we end up. So
also, this is the first book that we're doing sans Hector, and can I just say Hector had a lot to do in this book. There was a lot of Hector.
There was a lot of Hector. I'm glad we had a Hector.
We had a Hector, not the Hector.
If not
but
the
we had a
Hector.
Hector.
Imitation.
So anyway, if you don't know, if you're just joining us, we're reading a book called The Song of Achilles. It's by Madeline Miller. We've covered one of her books previously, Circe, which was another sort of retelling of a Greek myth with Circe instead, which was kind of exploring sort of like the place of women in that time and just how hard it was. And this time it was focusing on 2 very eccentric male characters who had a love relationship, a very loving relationship. This book is majority romance. But I like to say that, most of this book is like a nice hug. You pull them in close, you embrace, and then you just stab. And you just keep stabbing. And that's the end of the book.
Which is my favorite type of narrative, actually. Because I don't mean it in like I
trust issues,
sorrow, but more so a like real raw kind of ending that contains multitudes, which I think this one absolutely does. And I think what's interesting too about Madeline Miller's choices for who she focused on for each of her 2 books are 2 characters who are part of someone else's story and who don't really, there aren't a ton of Patroclus is spoken about in regards to Achilles. Circe is spoken about largely because of Odysseus and the Odyssey. And so giving them their own story to tell, I love that kind of like framing for a book. I've mentioned this one before, and I haven't read it in a long time, so I'd have to reread it to fully endorse it. But The Red Tent, which is about a character who I believe gets maybe 1 line in the Bible, Dinah. She is a daughter of Leah or Rachel, second wife, That's my
Hey!
that's my name. No, I'm not named after the biblical character, but, I'm named after a model from the '80s, actually, but,
Rachel
uh
Hunter?
mhm.
Oh my gosh, she was famous for doing a Pantene Pro V commercial where she said, "It won't happen overnight, but it will happen." And my mum and I keep saying that to each other.
Ah, that's
Mm.
amazing, yeah, my namesake. Um, but I I lost my train of thought.
Mine's a
Oh,
grandma who likes to
Red
stoink
Pen it's
teenager boys.
it explores the role of women in the Bible, but especially through a character who's really only she's the one sister of Joseph and all of his brothers, a la Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Anyway, point is picking a character from either a legend or a different
Mm.
story and kind of giving them uh, their own version and their own take on it. I love that. So if you all have recommendations in that vein, throw them in the chat.
Yeah, ruin us again. That would be amazing. Um, so this is the second half of the book that we're going to discuss this week. Last week we discussed the first half of the book. Obviously, spoilers, but only pertaining to the first half. Now we're going full book spoiler. So hopefully everyone here has read the book and it won't be spoiling, but we will be joining in conversation about what went down. Usually we start things off with a little bit of a, book good and a rating, whether it's a Goodreads system or, maybe it's out of a particular amount of spears or arrows that Achilles took. If you watched the movie, he had a Boromir moment. I watched it today. But Rachel, overall thoughts, did you like it more or less than Circe? Where does it stand in sort of like books that gut punch you?
I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I think I enjoy Circe slightly more, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily because of the subject matter. I just think it's a bigger book. It explores kind of a lot of different elements of mythology versus sort of around one key character because she interacts with a bunch of different sort of moments. But they're neck and neck. It's hard to pick. And Circe was the first book I read by her, and I just wept after that one, thinking this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. But I
Oh,
feel that way about this as well. I think it is a beautiful story. We've talked about this in the last episode and in general, but I love anything to do with mythology or a new take on it, and getting to see this kind of romance and get to know these characters and get to know why they each love each other, why they struggle with each other sometimes, what some of their flaws are, and to get to a tragic ending that still is hopeful and shows that you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be part god, you don't have to be a legend to
mm.
find your love wherever it ends up, even if it's in the underworld. So I loved it. What about you?
A lot of love in the comments, a lot of 4s, 5s, 4.5s. A recurring issue that people are saying is that the pacing for the second half of the book was very different to the first half of the book, which I
That's
agree
true.
with. I give it 5. I love the way she writes. It is so poetic. It is so evocative. It is so beautiful. It is just, like I think I said last week, it's like slowly lowering yourself into a pool of honey and lavender like that. And it just kind of just washes all over you. I love that kind
Nectar?
of, like, yes,
The gods
ambrosia.
the gods love ambrosia nectar.
I what I loved about this though is that we got the things that we didn't get from the Iliad, which was the origin story. Achilles usually gets depicted as a bit of a dick, but to see him sort of prioritize love and being told that his greatest weakness was that he was sort of soft, and then he didn't have like a good relationship with death, and then as soon as he kind of like shut off what death sort of like meant to him, and he saw himself as someone who was very good at killing. That shift, and then the demise of that, like I think that that adds to a greater tragedy, and
Mhm.
Greeks do their tragedies very well. But knowing that he was so pure and so just and so wonderful and so lovely, and this really pure and beautiful relationship that he had that he prioritized as well, was so great. And that's why the fall was
Oh,
so much harder to witness and to watch. But it's definitely a 5 for me. I think I preferred, um, uh, this sucks. I prefer the viewpoint for a man in these ancient Greek times because it's just a less vulnerable position to be in.
Yes. Yeah.
I felt safer
Yeah.
in this particular instance. And I was always on like a precipice of like nausea as Cersei, in a
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
So
It fuels my rage. Not that I need any help with that, because the world, but hey, at least we're not in ancient Greece. Yeah, I agree, and I think it was nice. There are obviously references to sexual assault and lots of violence, but it
mm.
was. I was glad that we didn't have to kind of live in that energy for
I was reading Cersei
too
the whole time,
long
like,
instead of the yeah, you're like,
it's time to be a woman still.
yep, yep.
Yeah, when is it
Things
good? Yeah.
change and
Even if you're a god, still not great. Still doesn't save you. Doesn't protect you. Kenzie's saying, "Well, that's a super interesting point, and that's what book club's all about. Different perspectives." Speaking of, True Scorn was a little bit concerned about the perspective of Patroclus being the narrator and continuing to narrate after he died. I actually was concerned. I've read it twice, and yes, it does count for 2 books on Goodreads. But yeah, well, I did. I read the whole thing twice. Which is why, and I finished it today, which is why I'm still highly emotional. There was emotional damage today, but the first time I was a little bit concerned, being like, "But he dead. Like, how is he narrating all this stuff? Like, I kind of want to be at the action." But it reminds you that how important the afterlife is. It
mhm,
really does play into why it is so important that Priam went back and asked for Hector's body, why the abuse of his body by, drawing it around through his chariot was so offensive,
yeah,
and was, really disgraceful. Why it's so important for Patroclus to be buried and have his name in the monument so that he can pass through the afterlife. And I think we didn't really go into how the afterlife is so important. I mean, if you know Greek history, you have the coins on the eyes and you're burnt at a pyre, and then you go onto the river Styx, and then you can go into this afterlife. But they consider the afterlife to be as important, if not more important, than your living, breathing life. And that's why they can spend a decade at war without their family and children and be like, all right, I'll catch you in the next one.
Well, I also think folks were talking about the pacing as well, and I hear what everyone is saying because it does move a little more quickly, pacing wise in the second half. But because a big chunk of that is those 10 years that they're at war, I don't know if I feel like we actually got a lot packed in. And
I
you were
don't need
saying
that
this
slowed
last
down.
yeah, you said this last week. I think that every word, there's so much intention and information and beauty and evocative feelings in every word that I feel like we got a lot of um, character development from both Patroclus and Achilles to, character development, maybe not growth, different
Mm.
different paths for everyone, but I could really start to
Evolve,
track
evolve.
where they start to divest in certain ways when you see I mean, Achilles, I think is slightly more obvious because he goes, pretty far down even before Patroclus dies, where he's really embracing the side of him that is a weapon to be wielded. But I think Patroclus, even though a lot of it is tragic, I love seeing him develop another relationship and be
Mm.
able to, not necessarily a romantic or sexual relationship, but someone that he loved and cared for, and being able to have his own moments too, off the battlefield, healing, working with Karen, and keeping it from, yes, he ultimately will do anything for Achilles and is a little blinded by his kind of love and focus for the human side of
Mm.
Achilles, when he is a more complicated person than that, and you sort of have to accept all sides of that. But it it kept him from veering too deep into, he's so blinded by his love and so codependent that he's not even pushing back against these things. And so I really
Yeah.
loved seeing that progression, and how also all of the other kind of men in power around them shape their relationship by the way they're reacting to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially, like, his son, Achilles' son at the end
Oh,
as well. What
yes.
That's the thing, it can always get worse.
Yeah.
It can always get worse, and
Yeah.
that was just really a bit of pill to swallow,
And
reading that at the end.
it's interesting to see Achilles raised more mortal and having more mortal attachments in his life, and then his son raised by
The
Thetis,
god. Yeah.
and this just arrogance and entitlement and
"I will do what I want."
ugh,
Awful.
mm-mm.
And everyone's just like, "The fuck is he?"
I didn't even know you existed.
Who is this little shit? Yeah,
Uh,
Pyrrhus? Awful. Awful,
yeah,
awful, awful.
awful.
Um, so let's talk about this downfall. Like, we kind of, like, see this book as the build it up and then the destruction of, and I love sort of like this metaphor where you have peace and harmony. You've got Menelaus, who is with Helen. We never really see or hear from Helen ever.
Nope.
She is not a part of this book, and she is the reason for this war.
She's a punk. I mean, she's an excuse for the war, but even when there's a duel offered, it's not about her. It
No,
stops being about
Agamemnon
her
is just
almost immediately. And it's another way, I think, of showing that women have absolutely no agency in this
yeah.
world. Zero.
Um, Having just watched Troy as well, I am convinced at this stage that Brian Cox, everyone's like, "What an amazing actor." Dude's not acting. I don't think he's acting. I just think
He's just always a Shakespearean,
a very
father. Yeah.
brutal
Father,
yeah,
yeah.
but he's fantastic as Agamemnon, and I was really going back and forth. I'm like, what is the pinnacle? What was the pushing point? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? Where does it start? Where does the downfall start? And I personally want to blame Agamemnon for all of it.
Mhm.
I know he was renowned for being a very selfish king. He wanted to conquer, he wanted it all. He wanted the women, he wanted to punish anyone who didn't worship him, he had to destroy. That's actually a personality disorder, by the way, having those traits. Not a great thing. Um, I feel that a leader, a good leader, is how Achilles demonstrated it kind of in the middle of the book when this war starts going for year 4. People are getting restless. They were told, "You'll be back next winter," or whatever it was. "You'll be back in a year. It's going to be so easy. We'll be in and out." And it's
Mhm.
at year 4 now, and they're getting restless, and this is just really dragging on. And Agamemnon is starting to kill people that are speaking out about it. And
Mhm.
Achilles, sensing an uprising, handles it with such diplomacy, with like such aplomb, where he's like, "You can go home anytime. I'm giving you your freedom. There are no restraints here, but I'm going to take your cut of the treasure," and instantly flips it so that people are like re-moralized, and in it for the right reasons. And the fact that Agamemnon was about to speak up to say, "We can only assume is if you flee, you will be killed. We will make a demonstration out of you," and using fear and hatred and threats and, your life against you. I loved that we saw a demonstration of true leadership. Agamemnon doesn't possess any true leadership qualities. And so that's why I'm like doing a debate with you right now, Rachel. And that is why my argument is that the downfall of Achilles is 100% to do with Agamemnon, who was a king who required absolute loyalty when Achilles joined the army as a goddamn favor and the best hero that there was. And he should be championing that because the modern day equivalent is not paying your workers the wages that they deserve. And if you are really, really good at your job, you can expect to do more work because you're dependable and your hours will go up and your expectations will increase because you are so good at your job, instead of being supported and rewarded for being good. That is my debate. Over to you, Rachel. Thank you.
I am certainly not going to defend Agamemnon. Wow, that was
Agamemnon.
a struggle for
I mean,
Rachel.
he's such a dick, you don't even want to say it.
I don't wanna say his name. No, he is terrible. He is not only is he all of the things that you're saying, but he's not even strategic in being awful. where you have someone like Odysseus who is willing to manipulate, lie, do whatever it takes, not necessarily take the credit, but also never claims to be a super honorable man. I also don't think he's perfect either, but I would take it way, way back and kind of for a theme of the book of viewing the people in your life or yourself or everything that we do contain multitudes, that we are full of different parts. And I would actually bring it all the way back to sort of the way that Achilles was taught. He's kept in the mortal world. He's not allowed to fight. He's not allowed to kill or see battle. He's never really seen any of those things.
Nah, mate. I was gonna do it, but I was like, it's such an Aussie thing.
No, it's great. But I think by him sort of only having one side of himself, that Patroclus also really only wants to see the mortal side of him, the tender side of him, the side of him that they ate figs and they played the lyre together and they learned how to heal and all of these things. But there is another part to him. He is also, yeah, he is part God. He was made kind of by the gods or fate to be this weapon, to be the best warrior. And I think by the people around him suppressing him to keep him safe, Patroclus trying to do that, because the shift for me is when he finally starts going out to battle. He doesn't think he's going to be able to kill anyone. And then he's made for this, the way they describe how he does it, and that it's almost inhuman and that you could just tell. And so I think he hasn't dealt with that. No one has dealt with that side of him so far. It's just been in theory or in this way that is going to become legend because of, the fates and the prophecy. So I think he gets a little consumed by it because he has not been around it so much, and that feeling that even Patroclus gets sort of taken over by, of the thrill and the adrenaline and people chanting your name and I could do anything and all of those things. And I also think that I'm sure if I were a prince and I met Agamemnon, like I wouldn't want, he grew up getting everything sort of and very sheltered in certain ways. And I think the moment they even meet on the battlefield or wherever their camp is, he doesn't kneel to Agamemnon. And there are little things like that that are just, and it's
but that needed to be ironed out then, didn't it? Like that. So your argument is he was a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
Without having a way to experience this before thrust into sort of like the crux, the deep of war, the bloodshed of it all, he wasn't equipped with it. So another analogy that I have is we talk about fame in this book, your legacy that you'll leave behind. And Achilles gets it in his head that he's destined to be famous and that he, a true sort of
and Thetis encourages that and tells, this is your purpose. This is your purpose, is to be this. You are everyone around him has warned him or told him that. Absolutely.
So the modern day version of that, Thetis is a show mum.
Yeah.
Thetis wants Achilles to pay rent from 5 years old. But Thetis is championing Achilles to have a namesake, to be the legend, and she's coddling, she's mothering, she's helicoptering. She sees Patroclus as a threat to her goal, and her priority supersedes what Achilles wants in life. And he almost goes through you've taken everything from me, that I'm so desperate for control back that I don't need you and I'm shutting you out while I kind of, burn in this house that I've sort of made myself. The other sort of eclipse of that as well, the modern day version of it, is still fame. Do you have a slow burn of a career where you sort of like continually build and grow and you've been in this for a while and you've had a taste here and there, but you understand that it can be fleeting? Or do you one day wake up with a super amount of followers and decide that it's okay to be a dick? And I think I've seen, you know, I am the person that, had a television career and like started a long time ago and then got into digital media where people would, get on YouTube and TikTok and all this Vine and blow up and think that they are all that. And then I'm there going, oh no, don't burn these bridges. What are you doing? Oh, this tastes good
Absolutely.
now, but like you're pissing off everyone around you. You're being a diva or you're being an asshole or you think that you're better than people and you're talking down to people. Your reputation is getting tarnished, but you think you're so hot shit that you don't even realize it. So that is like the modern day equivalent of what Achilles went through, where he was told that he was a champion. He saw his skills and realized what an asset that he was, but he didn't like paying his manager 10%.
Well, and
Or,
I totally, and I think also there's an element of what you were saying too, that don't burn bridges, and I think he sort of met his match in terms of pride and stubbornness, where neither man was going to bend, and
at the cost of
at the cost of everyone and everything, and
that didn't matter.
if
Yeah.
he had, and I think this also I find really fascinating, just the ancient Greek sort of concept of what honor is, right? And it's not a moral code at all. And so it's viewed as a competition, right? So if Achilles can maintain his honor, Agamemnon loses. If Agamemnon retains his honor and doesn't bow down or apologize or whatever he wanted, then Achilles loses, and he's lower in the esteem of others because he gave in. And I love that we see that Patroclus is the best of them because his version of honor is based on, and it's not perfect. He learns, I think, a lot through this, that Achilles is not the only person, and that, it is easier for him to kind of pretend like Achilles' stories on the battlefield are just stories and they aren't real people. But as it starts to, he actually sees everything falling apart around him, then he's able to see, okay, he's kind of blinded by this, but he is the best of them because honor is compassionate. Honor isn't, I have to be right or they have to apologize to me. It's people are dying. Do whatever you can.
Do the right thing. Yeah. And that's a really construed point of honor. And the fact that it comes down to two giant egos.
Yep.
And that's all. And and everyone reading this or in the story, everyone else, present day, like fictional, are all frustrated at both of them. I think what's really interesting as well in the first half of the book, I found myself going, what's so good about Patroclus? Why do we like this kid? Like,
I was going to ask you about that because at this point you're like,
I was like, Achilles is like king shit, and he's nice, and he's sweet, and he's inviting, and he, if he notices and observes you, then he's really great, and he tries. And then Patroclus is like, what do you even like me? I don't understand. And then the second half of the book, Achilles is like, wow, I am so great. I just did this and that, and I'm amazing. Don't you think I am? Patroclus is going around learning the names of the men in the camp, healing them, helping raise the children.
As many women as he can. And I think that's an interesting
building a community
view of looking at this huge system of honor and kings and wars that I think can feel really relevant right now when you feel like, oh, there are all of these big systems. How do I make a difference? And I really enjoyed seeing Patroclus kind of figuring out, okay, I might not be able to, although he keeps trying to defeat fate and prove fate wrong. But he looks to the little moments in the individual people that he can help the best that he can. And I loved seeing that for him because he has been so blinded by Achilles, and it takes gosh, where is her name? Briseis. It takes that relationship and realizing that Achilles will let her be assaulted, would let her be murdered. And it's such a contrast with the beginning of the book when he didn't even want to lie at all and had to find
Yeah.
workarounds for that. But even at the beginning of the second half of this book, which we read, when Agamemnon brought his daughter to be married to Achilles and they sacrificed her, and Achilles was horrified, wished he could have saved her. Fast forward to we're at this point now where it's so
He's
much
just
more about
detached.
being right that he
Yeah.
will use anyone except Patroclus to get that end. And
But I mean,
Patroclus defying him and going against him, I think is ultimately good for Patroclus for himself, but
should have let him kill Agamemnon.
it's a
Everyone would have been better
splinter.
off without that
Oh,
asshole.
agreed. They should have just assassinated him, but
But then it would have
that
been at the
starts
cost of
to
Briseis's
splinter them.
assault. Yeah.
It opens Patroclus up to other relationships and other desires and all of those, and it sort of hardens Achilles to just stand his ground no matter what, even to the point of he lets his pride allow him to let Patroclus out on the battlefield, because it's not to
The
save the
whole
people. It's
time.
because he thinks, oh, well, not only will they be grateful to me and I'll get my mojo back with the men, but I'll
I'm not going against
humiliate
my
Agamemnon.
word. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. That whole, and you're like, are you so blind? Like, everyone can see that this is going to go south. You're in war. You are the most hated man at the moment, and you're letting him go out, the person you love the most, go out in your armor to try and save the day. And you're so blind to the fact that he's also going to reap all of the disdain that you have created. Yeah, I loved it when Briseis was just
Me
like, you're
too.
not the only person that loves him. You were the one who did that. You let him go out. His death is on your hands. You royal fuck up. Like,
He would have
you
done
literally,
anything for you, and if you didn't know that, you are willfully blind. That he would sacrifice, and the thing that is so Greek tragedy and tales of fate and everything is that the part of the prophecy we hear earlier in this section of the book is that the best of uh, their subsection of Greece, I don't remember what it's called, but the best of them will die first, and then Hector, and sort of
the
when
Myrmidons?
yes, when I
Yeah.
read that, I was like, "Oh, it's gotta be my boy Patroclus, my sweet, sensitive, soft boy." But that Patroclus not only wants to save everyone, most importantly, but he also wants to preserve Achilles' name,
Yeah.
because as someone in the chat was saying too, especially in ancient Greece, your legend, your name, the story that you tell is another way that you live on. It's another way you show kind of who you were. And he agreed to even go to the war because he thought, if Achilles doesn't do this, he won't be fulfilled. He won't be the legend that he wants to be. He now wants that. He does seek that, even if he knows that it comes with a very high price. And so he goes to do this to also protect Achilles' name and story. And then after he dies, Achilles is like, fuck honor, it's vengeance, and then I'll die because he can't imagine it without him now. And if he knows if he can kill Hector, then he dies after that. And so it's such a frustrating, amazing, like, fate, sort of Sisyphean, to bring it back to Greek mythology, just rolling that rock up the
Nice.
hill. But this
I'll
sort
give
of
you that 10
that
points for that, at
the
least.
one thank you. The one thing that Patroclus wanted for Achilles after he dies, Achilles just like torches it.
Yeah.
Because he's not thinking about what Patroclus would have wanted. He's like, Patroclus would have wanted me to defeat him. No, he wouldn't. He'd want you to live. He'd want you to save your men. He'd want you to find another way. He wouldn't want you to drag this dude's body all over with your chariot. Like,
I know. That was messed up.
that's like, you can never go to the afterlife. That is, I get it, but take a
What
moment.
was really interesting though is that no one, when he was like in his stubborn stance, no one could penetrate that. His
Mhm.
mother won't listen to you. You don't understand. Patroclus. But I have an argument to be made where Patroclus, the relationship only really worked because of Patroclus's codependency, but in a way, his codependency enabled Achilles to get to that point. That's a full-on thing to
Oh,
say,
absolutely.
but
No, absolutely. I think that
there are so many parts, and that's definitely one of the steps
and
of him getting to where he
he's
was.
in denial about that side of Achilles. He does not want to deal with it. He does not want to see it. When he hears about it, he has to do all sorts of mental gymnastics to kind of deal with that, and doesn't think of these people as the people he's killing because it will probably break him. But he's also that way about fate. If he's so determined to defy fate and to save Achilles and to figure this out that he ends up fulfilling the prophecy, but he also ignores the very real and present danger of gods on the battlefield, the god of war. And
Well,
I
no, it was
get
Apollo. Apollo was there with all the puppet strings.
Mhm.
He personally offended Apollo, and Apollo just went, "You know what? I'm so high up in terms of the gods and what I can do. Like, you've got little Thetis who made him have a glow up when he started speaking to
Mhm.
have men idolize him. Hold my ambrosia. Like, I'm gonna absolutely fuck everyone up because they get to choose sides in war. Gods get to play a part in this,
It's their
and
little game.
the fact that the way that she described it, where Paris is aiming and Apollo literally touches the arrow and blows it to its destination. Like,
That's some major fuck you vibes. That's
like
like, I win.
this guy had been untouchable. This
Mhm.
guy fought a river god to get through to kill Hector, which he did in 0.3 seconds with
Mhm.
one well-crafted and aimed spear throw. This is a guy who every other champion came to face him down to finally kill Achilles. And he genuinely hoped that one of them could, but they couldn't touch him, and he killed all of them. This was a guy who, because he had been honed to become a weapon, but lost touch with his own humanity, became the most dangerous person of all. And the gods intervened to be like, no, you don't. And he just
Especially
didn't care.
especially after he loses sort of Patroclus, who I think if they had never met, this may have happened much sooner because Patroclus is just this.
He grounds him.
He grounds him, but he's sort of the almost like everything that Thetis hates about mortals and thinks that they're beneath her and, all of the other gods and demigods. He is weak. He was born sickly and small.
Mhm.
He
He was
cares more
quickly
about
exiled.
people exiled, didn't even think to lie
Yeah.
about that, and is compassionate, is, for men of this time, considers the well-being of women more than most. He's still, he has learned. If he had lived, he'd have more learning to do of like, oh right, you are still a prisoner. Like you're a Trojan. Like you're still technically a prisoner this whole time.
That
That is
was really jarring for me as
like,
well. "I'll
yeah,
protect you. I'll make sure you can run." And she's like, "Seriously, it's probably like my cousin."
yeah. This is all good. Yeah.
There were a few moments in the movie where it was visually easier to depict these particular things. Like with Briseis being rescued, you're like, oh yeah, because we established that she was already on the other side first. We saw that. And then also Achilles' league. So his men that fight with him, they had
Mhm.
different armor, they had a different sort of like uniform. And so like you could just tell like when that army came in and then when Achilles' army came in, like it held a lot more weight. So you actually knew who the Myrmidons were visually different. And I liked
Mhm.
that. There are so many great comments that are coming in.
Mhm.
I want to move the conversation onto Thetis and Patrocles's evolving relationship and then how it ends as well and why that's so important. But I'm going to go through some of these comments first because they're great. Game Wizard says Achilles feels like a sociopath who had one person keep his sociopathic tendencies in check. And so, of course, as soon as Patroclus was killed, that was the red button. That was the go switch. That just was the beginning of the end for Achilles. Could have been stopped. Achilles could have stopped it. This is what the tragedy is. Like
Mhm.
the harnessing of the tragedy is that we can go through this timeline and be like, that minor thing could have happened. This little tweak could have,
Mhm.
and it's like you see this snowballing and you're like, there are so many things that could have prevented it. But because all of these things happened,
Mhm.
catastrophe awaited.
I
I thought
also
that was a
think
lot.
I also think too, that Achilles, I do think there was a lot of good in him, and I think the thing about
He's my boy.
the whole book is that Patroclus, and I think by the end, posthumously, but to accept all sides of the person, and I think Patroclus is trying to change fate to save Achilles' life. Thetis is trying to manipulate fate to get him the best, most legendary outcome. Um, but they are choosing to see him as one side or the other, and he is both.
True. Yeah.
And no one is perfect. People are flawed, and just
Mhm.
because do I think Achilles was also kind of selfish because he doesn't even bother to ask Patroclus if he wanted to start a family. Doesn't even He's not even thinking about it at that point. But they
Why
still
like
love each other, and they still they I think Achilles makes Patroclus braver in some ways, and Patroclus brings Achilles kind of grounds him, as you said.
Um, I kind of like that we discussed, or it was an amazing comment last week saying that Achilles' biggest flaw is that if you have no purpose in his life, if he doesn't care about you, if you are just sort of like a person that exists, he doesn't see you. You have no substance. And I think that that is a very narrow mind view set. That is a selfish tendency that has a narcissistic trait where you are a center of the world and nothing else in that matters unless something or someone serves you. And I think that that was ultimately his biggest fault. Like this is when it shone, was when people were dying because of his stubbornness and that honor and the hubris that we were seeing, where those people, he didn't learn their names, he didn't know their faces, they were just sort of like army fodder for him, where if they died, so what? And
Because
that's
he's
where,
part god too. It's the same way that the gods view these people
yes.
too. And I'm the cartographer too. 10 years of being a human nuke has got to be super bad for your psyche too. That's another thing. War in
Mm,
general,
yeah.
the everything about it and the mentality and the reality of for 10 years of having to do this day in and day out and sort of they
Be
teach
away from your family, be away from your home.
do that, they teach you to try to turn that part off. And so, of course, he's
But
built
then stay in check as well.
a weapon.
Mm.
Yeah.
Elle actually has been bringing up amazing things. Elle, I think you studied mythology, literature. You have like a very in-depth understanding for all of this, and you've got 2 points that I would love to bring up. One of them we have to scroll back quite a bit, but it's a scene in the book that sticks in your mind. It's the conversation where Achilles is just saying and this, while telling Patroclus everything that he loves about how he looks. It's a big win in body positivity in my book. I think that we were so used to celebrating how perfect Achilles was, looks wise, athleticism, everything. So for Achilles to show that moment where he then worships or appreciates and desires every single thing about Patroclus, that was such a beautiful moment. And I think that
Mhm.
this is where like the romance and the vulnerability was so important, and seeing their relationship like that. Big fan. Also, Elle also says if Agamemnon died, so many issues would have been solved. That's why I'm like, just get him, just get rid of him.
Odysseus, like, do some sneaky snake stuff and
Seriously,
take that
brilliant
player off
ideas,
the
man.
board.
But knew his place and knows that this is an unmovable mountain. And then Elle's favorite quote was when Thetis, right at the end, because Achilles is gone, says, "Have you no more memories?" And Patroclus says, "I'm made of memories." And she says, "Speak then." And it was just every little nuanced, tiny build up of who this man was, whether it was a reaction that he would make or, how his body language would move. And it was just encompassing every beautiful thing about him. Again, this is what happens when it's written by a woman. because women notice all the small details and celebrate all those things that make people beautiful. Whereas I feel like with a guy, it's like, what are the memories? She's hot. We fucked a lot. Yeah. So like that romance is just so important, I feel, for their relationship.
I think too, that that line that I brought up last week about the difference in how Patroclus and Achilles described their love. And Patroclus thought of Achilles as the sun. His whole life revolves around him, and this warmth and this glow and life and energy. And Achilles was that you make me want to eat the world raw. And that's what he says to I think Hector. He says,
Devour.
I will eat you raw. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like that line was both in the movie and in, I'm guessing, the Iliad and in this book, where it's like, lions don't make deals with men. Like, it's this whole, we're on separate levels. Like, I don't see you as a person sort of thing. It was beautiful.
Thetis. Let's talk about it.
Let's do it. Okay. So if you are just joining us, we're talking about The Song of Achilles, amazing book written by Madeline Miller, where we're talking about Patroclus' point of view of Achilles. I've got a dog that wants to bark. Don't do it. Don't do it. And the fact that this telling of it shows a very wonderful, deep relationship between two men in Greek mythology. It turns out that Achilles has a demigoddess for a mother who prods and pokes around like the mother-in-law that no one wishes they had. And throughout the entire book, Thetis has absolutely not shied away from her disdain and distaste of Patroclus. Doesn't like them together. Doesn't think they should be together. Achilles is too good for him. He's weighing him down. All these sorts of things. I wonder how much of this does Thetis know that should anything happen to Patroclus, the stronger their love is, the bigger the downfall is going to be. So you know how it's like it's better to have loved and lost than to have loved at all? I think Thetis is like the love and the loss is going to unravel him.
They're intertwined, yeah.
Let's not have him love at all. So I'm going to just say, no, I don't accept. Get rid of him. Get rid of him. Look at him. He's pathetic. He's wasteful. He's so much worse than you. Trying to stop that relationship so he's not tied down to anyone. And his feelings can't be used against him should that person be killed.
Well, and that's what we were talking about a little bit too last time, where Achilles was saying, have you ever heard of a happy hero? But it's not, it's connected to the love that they have for someone else and the loss of that love that usually sends them to do very intense things. And I also really enjoyed at the end because, you know, we do see Thetis, even though we obviously know that Achilles was born out of rape and assault and
conquest.
And you can understand sort of her rage and trying to control what she can. But I think showing the little bit of the flashback we get at the end when she is speaking with Patroclus to kind of show that this is her, it shows a more human, ironically, side of why she is trying to, it felt to me like, he's mine. I can't even fully have him. I can't fully protect him. This is the thing I can control. This is the thing. And she thinks she knows what's best and doesn't matter the way because fate, cruel mistress.
Yeah. And it was interesting, like that she, even in his death, where she's like, you know, I don't know you anything. No, I don't even talk to him. He's dead to me. Like, move on. What's going on? But I think that hearing how Patroclus loved Achilles and that this was something so much bigger than Thetis even, and the fact that Pyrrhus was a little shit because she was literally going to convert. Well, that didn't work. On to the next project of mine. I absolutely loved that she finally accepted in death that their love was true and important and worth nourishing into the afterlife. Like, he's waiting for you.
And also that as he's showing these memories and telling her about who his Achilles was, she also acknowledges, "That was you. You saved the women." That and so a
Oh,
lot
all the great points about him. Yeah, but Achilles did all these things, and she's like, "Actually, no, you
he
did
did
all of
them
it."
for you because
Yeah.
you are inclined to do that, and I think seeing Patroclus where he starts and how deeply sad, understandably, and lonely and insecure that he is, and to kind of have this moment that so much of what he loved about Achilles was also inside him. I'm not gonna cry, definitely not.
I've already done it like 3 times in the last hour. We've got some great comments. Game Wizard says, "Thetis's possessiveness corrupts her desire to love her son and see what she thinks is best for him." Um,
She's also a god too, so what her view of what's best for him is very different. And I think her view for Achilles and Patroclus' view of Achilles and what would be best for him, they're both on the opposite sides of the same coin. And again, ultimately, fate is going to fate. But
yeah, and those
I
coins are
think
gonna end up on his
pushing,
eyelids because he's dead.
I think pushing him too far one way or the other, again, it wasn't good for him overall.
Jay Buntrock says, "I understand Thetis's motivations better when she revealed the three witches' prophecy that her child would be greater than its father." So as soon as like the legend came into place, in a way. But that was, I mean, we were dragged through a tragedy. We were literally Hector's body
I
for
know.
like the second half of that book. We felt every scratch and abrasion on our bodies. But as far as like a happy ending for a tragedy, I mean, tick, we got it. They both died and it was unnecessary and it didn't need to happen. But the acceptance that Thetis finally showed Patroclus in death was just beautiful.
Mhm.
But it's just that thing where it's like none of it needed to happen. But that's what the fate was all about.
Mhm.
Um, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I know that you've got a heart out. But I want to talk really quickly about the fact that we know the story.
Mhm.
Achilles' heel. He was dipped into immortality by his foot, and you couldn't dunk the heel in. So his heel was the only thing that could kill him. And that is how the tale is shared time and time again. And we didn't get it in this book. It wasn't about Achilles' heel at all. There was a few kind of twists on all of it. But I wanted to read an excerpt from Madeline Miller's website that talks about
Oh.
why she didn't use Achilles' heel. And she says there's no such thing as a definitive Greek myth. Examine the tales of any hero, and you'll find at least half a dozen variations. Some are small, like the names of the parents. They might change how many children they had, but others are huge. Like, did Helen actually go to Troy? Or was it only a golden phantom meant to take her place while she escaped to Egypt? Achilles himself continued to have new adventures right up through the Middle Ages. Achilles' most famous myth, his fatally vulnerable heel, is actually a really late story. Our earliest account of it is by a Roman author almost a millennium after the Iliad and the Odyssey were first composed. During those 1,000 years, a number of other stories popped up to explain Achilles' seemingly invincibility. But the Iliad and the Odyssey contained the simplest. He wasn't really invincible. He was just extraordinarily gifted in battle. And since the Iliad and the Odyssey were my primary inspiration, and since their interpretation seemed more realistic, that's the one I chose to follow.
Yeah, I think she also referenced in the first section of the book, when she when Patroclus is sort of worried that Thetis is going to try to burn the mortal blood out of Achilles. That's
Okay.
another version of that
Mhm.
myth, and I think you know there's also something to be said of the person who was perhaps started as the most vulnerable in Achilles' life was actually his weakness and downfall because he not I think he took him for granted sometimes. I think Patroclus also again enabled him and didn't really push push him as much until it was maybe too late on that side, and that he almost tarnished his legend in general, and is known to be kind of an arrogant ass
Mm.
because he also, even with Patroclus gone, everything else stopped mattering, and he just became pure violence and pure vengeance. So I feel like it's maybe a metaphor.
I was actually thinking about that. What celebrities had such a legacy or a long career or such an extensive sort of impact,
So
and
many.
most of it positive, but the last few years of their life, which happened to be their worst or when all the shit came out, stained their legacy. And that's actually how we remember them, not for all the good that they've done, but the bad. And that's what Achilles embodies. And that's what I loved about this book. We got to see a version of him that wasn't this arrogant idiot, that wasn't stubborn from, day one, that had these
Lots of
beautiful
little.
moments.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It
So
was
that
lots
was
of little things that led to everything that happened. It wasn't all one thing. That's why I feel like it's sort of everything. It's his very existence was leading him down this path. Maybe the details would have differed, but
this book was great.
I know. I'm so
This
glad
book
we
was
read
so
it.
good. Madeline Miller is amazing. We are going to leave a lot of the conversation for the after show, which is going to happen over on Geek Bomb's Discord, and it's not going to be recorded. So if you know, you know. If you're in, you're in. And if you're not, you're not. But some of the other things that we've got in this document, that we were going to go over is the reality of war, what war looked like over the 10-year span, the will of the gods. How often do gods interfere with the war? I actually have a theory that when Patroclus dons on his armor and is able to suddenly throw the
Yeah.
spear, that was heavily influenced by Thetis going, "I'm with you on your game plan. We need to do something," and stat. The relationship between Achilles and Patroclus. Ugh, and then the introduction of Briseis in that as well, like what that looked like, why that dynamic was necessary or needed, and why Achilles was just like really blanketed from that. And I will argue that Patroclus had a sense of nurturing from Achilles that just stopped when he went to war,
Mhm.
and he needed to find another avenue for the nurturing,
Mhm.
which is probably why some people are in thruples, you know. Anyway, the Iliad's inspiration and some of the differences. So, some of the things that Madeline Miller chose to keep into it. One of the great questions that I'm going to talk about in the after show. In the Iliad, Patroclus is a pretty fearsome warrior in his own right, with a higher kill count than even Ajax. But do you think that Miller's choice to eradicate that aspect of Patroclus's character oversimplifies his and Achilles' relationship into stereotypes of dominant and non-dominant?
That is a very good question, and I also have a
Thoughts?
thought that I'm gonna
Good.
try not to
Keep a hold of that
try to
one.
hold on to.
Keep a hold of that one. And if you watched the movie Troy, I'm going to be dissecting some of the differences between the book that we've just had here and Troy. The biggest one is that this book was more romance and really talking about the character and the love between two men, whereas Troy is a masculine Jekyll circle.
Take it. It's yours, aka ancient Greece's whole vibe for men. Just take it.
Burn Troy! Burn it! Oh my God, Brian freaking Cox in that
I'm gonna have to
movie.
watch that this weekend.
It's on Netflix if you want to see it.
Well, I haven't seen it since it came out, so that's gonna be fun.
I also love that Elle and Corinne said book good in all caps. So there you go. We have to announce our next book though.
We sure
It's
do.
almost July. We're going to start
Uh,
another one.
yes.
Are you ready? We did a poll on Nerdist. If you're not following Nerdist's Twitter account, you're missing out on voting for the book. Now, I will say for this one, we may have caught the attention of the
I was
author
gonna say we should see if we
who
can talk to her.
who definitely pushed her audience into getting more eyeballs on this one because apparently we want to try and convince her publishers to write a sequel for
I
it.
want this. So,
Yeah.
I'll briefly we'll talk obviously more about it next month. but I read this a couple of years ago and have
It's
been
Into the
wanting.
Drowning Deep, by the way.
Yes, it's called Into the Drowning Deep. The
By Mira
author,
Grant,
Mira
which
Grant,
is her
pseudonym.
yes.
Hmm. And but I've been wanting to read it with book club because I feel like it's such a great book for us. It's imagine if a show like Jessica Chobot's Bizarre States went on a voyage to the Mariana Trench to do some sort of mockumentary about, are there mermaids, are there creatures out here, and they all disappear. And then 10 years later or 7 years later, the sister of the main host, if Jessica Chobot is this, or Maude, but Jessica Chobot has the paranormal podcast as well. But her sister, who's a biologist, and a reunion tour to go check out this place where this entire crew disappeared. And it's from multiple perspectives, but it feels like something that like could happen to one of us because we work in this field. And
Uh-oh.
if you ended up going there and looking at yeah, I love it. It's super, super fun, and scary. And
I know, it's got a
also,
bit horror in it. Thank you for
yeah,
that.
it's sinister, let's say that. So I'm really excited for everyone to read along, and I can't wait to hear what you think. Little housekeeping note before we wrap up too. Normally, obviously, we are doing the last 2 Wednesdays of the month. The first Wednesday for the first half of the book, second Wednesday for the second half of the book. But the second to last week in July is when Comic-Con starts.
And we're both going to be there.
And we're both going to be there. And I don't know if I can figure out how we would do it from there without my brain exploding. So we're going to do the next one on Tuesday, July 19th. That's going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific, live here. We'll be discussing the first half of the book. You are
Second. We're going to be finishing it up that week, bub.
No, the 27th is when we'd finish it.
First two
Yeah.
Wednesdays, isn't it? Oh, second two Wednesdays. Second two. Good.
Wrong book club.
Geek Bomb's first two. My bad.
Tuesday, July 19th, 5 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be reading Into the Drowning Deep, chapters 1 through 18. So stop at the end of the section called Zone 3. That will be Tuesday, the 19th of July. And then the following week, Wednesday, the 27th, we will finish the second half of the book. And we're super excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah, it's so funny. Mariana's Trench is actually a name of a band that my friend Allison took me to see. And I thought that Mariana's Trench was another way to say Mariana's vagina. But anyway, straight after this, we're heading to an after show. What do you think in Trench? Anyway, we're heading to an after show.
I knew where you were going before you finished the thought.
Mariana's Trench. What am I supposed to think?
I know.
Anyway, I'm going to dig my way out of that one. Pun. We're going to go to Geek Bomb's Discord to jump in for the book club Q&A for this one. So if you've got the access to the Discord, you're more than welcome to join in for that one. If you want the access, head over to patreon.com/geekbomb to get that access. Sign up to any tier and you'll get it immediately. Join into the Discord and join us for that discussion. We told you some of the questions that we're going to address there, but we'll see you for the next book, Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. I'm looking at the script and nothing's popping up. But anyway, great. We'll see you for that one
Awesome.
next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.